The rail lines may be saved at the very last minute, so we'll be talking a bit about that. Although this is still just tentative, so there is a chance for that to be reversed. So we'll talk about some of the things that led up to this, where we're sitting at right now, and what this could mean if this does turn sideways before we go. In other news, oil prices may find a floor at $80 per barrel as Biden looks at a way to go back and fill the strategic petroleum reserves, thus taking oil away from the refiners and making your gas prices go up. So we'll go over some of that and where we go with that. DeSantis, not to be left behind by governors like Ducey and Abbott, decides to send some of his illegal immigrant population up to Martha's Vineyard. And, well, people are noticing, so we'll go over some of that and what's happening with that. And one of the Queen's guards, during the funeral, faints at the podium while holding vigil. Oddly enough, as far as I know, I haven't pre-read the article. We have no indication as to what the reasoning is behind this. I'm sure some people will say vaccine, but we'll go over what the Daily Mail and the Daily Wire have reported and decide for ourselves. It is going to be all this and more. Welcome back to the Backup Channel. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. You guys probably think that I just do the lo-fi here for you guys over on Contemporary, but I listen to this all day at work too. I like it. Well, not all day. Sometimes I'll go with like harder rock or All Time Low or something else like that. Sometimes I'll do Sinatra, but like a lot of the times too, later in the day, where I'll listen to a podcast or something while I'm just doing menial work, I'll put this on in the background because the podcast will be in the headphones, what little bit I do listen to, because I don't listen to very much anymore. I don't want most of my opinion to be tainted by what other people have said. I would rather give you my own opinion, but I'll listen to Fallout lore or video game stuff. I like a lot of history stuff. I've been looking at the collapse of the Bronze Age lately, that kind of stuff over there, but I'll still have the lo-fi on, so like it's not completely silent around me. So everyone else who walks into where I work, actually, it isn't just walking into a dead silent, echoey room. So, yeah, it's always, and especially like with the lo-fi too, like I can listen to something and pay attention to it without being distracted by the music that's coming on outside the headphone. And I don't even wear big headphones like that. I've got a set of little earbuds that I wear at work. But anyway, that's what I have to say about that. This is Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar. I set Job for 9 as a mod on the Backup Channel, even though we will be going back, by the way, to, I think my ban is up. Not my ban, but my suspension is up tomorrow. So I think we can go back to the main channel tomorrow. I'm going to test it. We'll probably still be on the Backup Channel, but yeah, let's get into it. Let's get started. And, I mean, the union thing, that was so wild, and we spent so much time talking about this yesterday, where Democrats are like trying to make laws to make it so people can't go on strike on the union that they support. It does look like we have a tentative deal about this. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know how any of this is going to to trail off, but we'll continue to watch this. We'll see what's happening with this. Tomorrow's the deadline, so if the union people say, hey ho, we won't go, then we're still looking at that shutdown. But tentative, we have a deal, which means a squeaker and a save at the last possible second for the Biden admin. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Queen's Guard. We'll talk about some other stuff off the economy. Patagonia has apparently, by the way, donated their entire company to fight climate change. They're being held now by a nonprofit trust that's based in climate change, which means that Patagonia gear is going to go in price. Way out of the ability and the range of most of us to afford, which it was to begin with, but we'll talk about that over here on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Breckenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, who will be on a special night this Friday because of travel. They were not able to be on Tuesday. Also, go check out KTZed, Tweets by Brit. Go and check out the Porch Boys already. The No Gimmicks Podcast, Mr. Behavior. Go check out PJ Patriot. Go check out all this great programming because these are all people who are dedicated to bringing you news by the common man for the common man. And I think that's important. Rather to get your news from people who are like you than people who are sitting out there wearing a suit that costs more than your house. But let's get into it. Let's get started. And we will start, as always, with the finance and the Dow. The Dow turned itself up at the very end of the day, just by the skin of its teeth. The Dow was up, I think it was 35 points by the end of the day. 135.09 was the final off of that. And it was a real roller coaster, too. It looked like people started to try to buy in, and then it just tanked out again. But then people tried to buy out again, and it tanked again. And just at the very end of the day, it eked out a win out of nowhere. So, I don't know, it's a roller coaster. We've got a lot of data going both ways, and I think a lot of people that are going to invest, especially if this deal winds up being tentative and permanent with the government and the unions, are actually going to throw some money back in. But I think a lot of people were sitting on the edges of their seats with bated breath, waiting to see what happens with this, because between the inflation tick up and the gas prices starting to tick back up in some areas, although not here, thankfully, there are a lot of people and a lot of unknowns going into the next couple months as the government tries to fix all the problems that it had for the last 2 years, just long enough to wrest control and hold it through the rest of everything. Looking in at your Bitcoin. Bitcoin is at $20,141 and 70 US cents. Still holding relatively steady. It's got some ups and downs, but I mean, we're sitting in a fairly safe range here. It lost $86 on the day. It's lost more, but it's also gained considerably more than that. Bring this out to the 5 days so we can see what happened yesterday, and we're still seeing a steady. I mean, we saw the significant drop the day before yesterday, but yesterday just kind of sat steady, with the lowest point coming at 19,778.90 towards the end of the trading on regular stocks yesterday. At which point I said that Bitcoin is on sale. So it's not something I necessarily recommend that you go out and get. It's fun to watch because this is the safe crypto that Soccer Mom America has heard about, and some of them put into their Roth IRAs, which means, and as I always say, this is one of the fastest assets that you can liquefy and turn back into US dollars. So this is going to show any sharp swings in the economy faster than stocks, gold, or anything else. And I always say it seems to be a very good indicator on the short term, on the shortest of short terms, where the economy is going. So we'll continue to watch this and see where it goes. Looking in at fuel, gas prices in the Madison area. The Fleet Farm in DeForest is in the 318 club. Everything else around Madison is at 319 throughout the area, which it's holding steady with a couple of little outliers dropping a little bit, but for the most part we're seeing steady prices around here. I know that a friend in Texas has mentioned that it's going up down there. I have heard some thoughts in Illinois that it's starting to tick up a little bit around there, but around here it is staying fairly steady. And miraculously, the city of Janesville, which is the closest city to where I live, because I don't go to Madison for anything. I don't spend money in Dane County for anything. Is actually lower right now than Madison is for the first time since I've started tracking where the gas prices were going. So that's what we have for that. Let's see what IBD has to say for the morning. From Investors Business Daily. Dow futures rise as market tries to rebound. Exxon Tesla stock near buy points. You know what? As long as, because we may actually be going straight to the backup channel, let's make one more person a mod over there just in case, because I know that they're watching. That way I don't have to go back out and start modding people up right away when I do get inevitably banned from the main YouTube. For Matt Carson, Dow futures were mixed early on Thursday, along with the S&P and the NASDAQ futures, as a national rail strike was averted at the 11th hour. Hey, I got news for you, Ed Carson. It's not averted yet. This still has a chance to fall apart. The stock market rally bounced on Wednesday, but it was an uneven advance that only recaptured a sliver of Tuesday's huge sell-off. Investors should keep exposure light until the major indices regain their 50-day moving averages. Energy stocks took the lead Wednesday, with crude oil prices up and natural gas futures jumping. Devon Energy cleared an early entry. Exxon is on the cusp of flashing a buy signal. Tesla flirted with an aggressive entry on Wednesday, reclaiming a key level. Arista Networks and Pure Storage have a little work to do. Devon Energy is an IBD leaderboard and swing trader. Devon Energy is also Wednesday's IBD stock of the day. Tesla, Devon, Arista Networks, and Pure Storage are all on the IBD 50. Arista Networks and ExxonMobil are on the IBD Big Cap 20. On the futures, Dow futures rose 0.1 versus fair value. The S&P lost a fraction, and NASDAQ declined 0.2. The 10-year yield rose 4 points to 3.45%, just below 11-year highs. Crude oil futures fell 1%, while natural gas prices sank nearly 6% after soaring on Wednesday. The Biden admin said Thursday there's a tentative deal between rail operators and workers that averted a possible strike as soon as Friday that would have disrupted supply chains once again. We're not there yet, you guys. I know it sounds like it's good news, but don't put all your chickens into this basket yet. The Biden admin still has the ability to screw this up, and they're very good at it. CSX, Union Pacific, and other rail operators rallied early Thursday after falling Wednesday. The tentative deal was cited as a reason for natural gas prices falling on Thursday. Investors will get a slew of economic data before Thursday's market open. August retail sales, as well as the September Philadelphia Fed Manufacturing Index and New York's Fed's Empire State Index, are due at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. In addition to weekly jobless claims data, August industrial production is set for 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time. And remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. Let's grab one from Market Watch, talking about the rail, and then we'll actually go in and talk about the rail strike and the aversion to that. From Market Watch, railroad stocks rally after strike averted to provide a big boost to the Dow transports. From Tommy Kilgore. Shares of railroad operators in pre-market trading on Thursday, after a railroad strike was averted, said a tentative deal was reached. Shares of CSX jumped 3.2% ahead of the open. Union Pacific climbed 3.5%, and Norfolk Southern Corporation hiked up 1.7%. The combined implied price gains of those stocks would add about 78 points to the Dow, which would represent a 0.6% gain. The Dow transports had fallen 4.2% over the last 2 days amid fears of a labor strike. Meanwhile, futures for the Dow advanced 59 points, or 0.2%. So that's what we see coming off of that. And hey, this is not official financial advice, but it does look like today, if you do need to pad up or bolster up your savings or your 401k, railroads might be the way to go. But it's always tentative. Always check with your official financial advisor, because I'm just a guy talking into a microphone and I don't know. I can make speculation based on what the news says, but I don't know. But that's what we see for that. Let's talk from CNN breaking this morning. Tentative railroad deal could avert a disaster neither the nation nor Biden could afford. From Stephen Collinson, and this is, as always, an analysis, which means this is an op-ed. A tentative agreement that appears to have averted a national freight railroad strike not only avoids a disaster for the U.S. economy, but also heads off what would have been a political nightmare for the Biden admin. Trumpeting a win for tens of thousands of rail workers who worked tirelessly through the pandemic, President Biden announced an agreement early Thursday morning after an all-night bargaining session hosted by Labor Secretary Marty Walsh between the union's leadership and the railroad's labor negotiators. The threat of a strike has not gone away entirely. The deal needs to be ratified by union members, but the tentative agreement provides immense political relief during the midterm election season. An extended halt of the vast freight trains that snake across the prairies and north to Canada and south to Mexico would have caused a full-blown economic, social, and political crisis at a time when the nation is still clawing its way back from fragile, redefined sense of normality after the pinkpox pandemic and facing the worst spikes in food prices since 1979. A quarter of the way into the 21st century, it's a little shocking that a rail network that most Americans probably don't spare a thought for still forms the economic backbone of the nation. But the latest showdown is far from the only occasion in history when labor disputes in this critical industry have threatened nationwide disruption and have turned into a high-stakes political drama as a result. Without freight rail, the country can't properly function. The dispute may be focused on the railroads, but it's also emblematic of a wider trend in industrial relations in modern America as workers squeezed in ventures, pared back aggressively for maximum profit potential. Of course it's the billionaire's fault. From retail to healthcare to transportation, demand livable working conditions and turn to unions for help. The repercussions of a rail strike would have been dramatic. Roughly 30% of America's freight moves by rail at fast trains. Some with 240 wagons don't move. The country would need to find impractical 80,000 truck drivers to make up the shortfall. It may seem counterintuitive, but a strike on the railways would send gas prices for cars soaring again. That's because refineries would struggle to get sufficient crude from their rail deliveries. Recently harvested crops would be stuck, unable to reach processing plants, and could spoil. Farm groups warn of the threat to fertilizer stocks that are transported by rail and needed for the next planting season. There would have been shortages of food and other items in stores, and prices could have risen again, adding to the current plague of inflation. New and used cars would be more expensive if factories can't get parts they need for their assembly lines, and the ports that became clogged during the pandemic would have once again filled up, in a huge problem for the U.S. economy that would quickly send shockwaves around the world. So, this is all stuff that we talked about yesterday. I want to see if there actually is something in here. And it doesn't appear that we have any idea on what the deal is currently. But I know a big one was a change in the rules for time off. However, in a situation like this, it would not surprise me to find out that there was also a major push to raise the wages once again, therefore making the cost of transport go up. This is going to affect your wallets. Possibly not as severely as it was before. Biden's team worked to head off a political nightmare. The rail shutdown was not just a threat to the day-to-day lives of millions of Americans. The prospect was a huge problem for Biden and Democrats. First, because they know their brightening chances of staving off a Republican wave in the midterms could be dashed by another devastating shock to the economy that sends prices even higher and shatters the sense of normality that Biden pledged to restore. That's still coming, by the way, just so you know. Another surge in inflation caused by a rail strike could also force the Federal Reserve to prolong its aggressive interest rate strategy, which is expected to go up another notch next week, and so raise the chances of an overcorrection that sends the economy into a recession. The president, boosted by the passage of key congressional items, has been aggressively selling a story that America is back on the move again. It's a lie, but he's been selling the story, and the economy is ready to roar. It's also a lie, as we start to see more and more people laying off. A rail strike would quickly tarnish his credibility in selling that narrative. Yeah, this article that I have over here about Twilio tells us that that's a lie. In a broader sense, the rail dispute pulled Biden between two competing strands of his political identity. He is the most pro-union president in decades. Carter would like a word. He needs the support of the movement to drive turnout in November and has no desire to be seen pressuring workers to accept a bad deal. And yet, here we are. On the other hand, the success of his entire presidency rests on getting inflation down and preventing Republicans from amassing Capitol Hill majorities that could make him a domestic lame duck. Republicans seeking to wrest the midterm debate back from the controversy over the Supreme Court's overturning of abortion rights already spotted an opening in the rail dispute. The GOP tried and failed to pass a bill in the Senate that would enshrine deals most railway unions have made with companies to avert a strike. President Biden should have already resolved this himself. Democrats must let this pass, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell tweeted. But some Democrats are unwilling to put pressure on unions. The GOP measure was in the end blocked by progressive Senator Bernie Sanders, who's twice run for the Democratic presidential nod. The Vermont Independent blasted rail companies for making billions of dollars in profits and awarding their CEOs millions in compensation, but while imposing inhumane working conditions. Because he's Bernie Sanders. But this is officially, at this point, so far staved off. Once again, do keep in mind that there is still plenty of room for the Biden admin to screw this up. And screw this up they may. But for right now, we see this. I do question, and I know I shouldn't, but if some of this was a political stunt that the union leaders had always planned to capitulate to Biden. But now they can come back out and say, hey, Trump said that he was the major deal maker, but he couldn't even broker a deal. Look at Biden brokering a deal right at the 11th hour. He is our savior. It is a very religious movement. I thought about it, and the show was too full. I had to cut it. That Twitter safe account, Jojo from Jers, that Twitter foists on all of us who are political. The one that none of us follows, and yet she still shows up in our timelines left and right. That one. She went to the White House yesterday for some sort of speech. I don't know. They had all the tables and everything set up. I don't even know if Biden spoke yesterday or not, but she got a picture with Joe Biden, and it seems to be a religious experience for her. Because these people worship the government. I cut that for time, and it did seem a little bit catty. Let's talk a little bit about some of what happened and how we got to here. From Fox Business, this is from 2 o'clock Eastern Time yesterday. Railroad union votes to authorize strike that could hammer the economy. From Breck Dumas. One of the unions representing rail workers said Wednesday that its members rejected a proposed deal with rail carriers and voted to move forward with a strike that could have severe consequences for the U.S. economy. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers issued a statement saying that roughly 4,900 of its members turned down the tentative agreement with the National Carriers Conference Committee representing railroads, but noted that they would hold off on striking for at least a few weeks while other unions continued their talks. The tentative agreement has been rejected and the strike authorization vote was approved by IAM District 19 members. IAM District 19 said in a statement, out of respect for other unions in the ratification process, an extension has been agreed to until September 29th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. This extension will allow us to continue to negotiate changes with the NCCC in hopes of achieving an agreement our membership would ratify. IAM Freight Rail members are skilled professionals who have worked in difficult conditions through the pandemic to make sure essential products get to their destinations, the statement continued. We look forward to continuing that vital work with a fair contract that ensures our members and their families are treated with the respect they deserve for keeping America's goods and resources moving throughout the pandemic. The IAM is grateful for the support of those working towards a solution as our members and freight rail workers seek equitable agreements. IAM is one of 4 unions that remain holdouts on the deal put forth by the Presidential Emergency Board, appointed by Biden. Another 8 rail unions have agreed to the plan. 2 other major rail unions signaled over the weekend that they would not sign on without further concessions from railroads. The leaders of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail and Transportation Workers, Transportation Division, and the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, Teamsters Rail Conference, issued a joint statement Sunday saying the PEB proposal does not go far enough to improve working conditions for our members. The Biden admin is currently involved in the negotiations to avert a strike, which the Association of American Railroads says would cost upwards of $2 billion per day, hurting businesses and consumers alike. If a deal is not reached by the deadline, Congress is expected to get involved to stop any shutdown, but Speaker Pelosi said Wednesday she's now engaged with the White House and unions in an effort to avoid a strike, adding that she would rather see a negotiated settlement than actions from Congress. Well, that's because actions from Congress would screw you in the midterms. That would put the final nail into the coffin before people go out to early vote. Oh yes, we're going to pass a law forcing people to go to work? Or pass a law to make it easier for people to scab and cross that picket line? That would be the end of the careers for most of these Democrats that are fighting tooth and nail to hold their seats and hold their majorities. On the trucking side, U.S. Trucking Group asked Congress to avert rail shutdowns by Lisa Bertline and David Shepardson over at Reuters. The largest U.S. trucking industry group on Friday urged Congress to be prepared to prevent railroad shutdowns of major U.S. railways, and the unions represented by their workers do not have labor contracts in place by September 16th. Congress should take swift action to avoid debilitating and unnecessary labor disruption that could cost the country billions each day, Chris Spear, chief executive at the American Trucking Associations, wrote in a letter to congressional leadership on Friday. Contract negotiations between railways, including Union Pacific, Berkshire Hathaway's BNSF, and CSX, and unions representing the 115,000 workers, an impasse this summer. President Biden stepped in, appointing an emergency board that made settlement recommendations to help avoid disruptions to food and fuel supplies and worsening inflation. The railroads and unions have until just after midnight September 16th to reach a deal based on the board's recommendations. Failing to do so opens the door to union strikes, employer lockouts, and congressional intervention. And not only that, the truckers are trying to get involved with this because, as I mentioned yesterday, there are simply not enough drivers on the road. There may be enough trucks and enough trailers on the road at this point, but there are not enough drivers on the road to pick up the slack. Not only that, but, with the relative, and I say relative in a very, very relativistic term, the relatively low amount of diesel fuel that it takes to move things by rail versus what it would take to move them by truck, plus the expenses for the extra engine time, the extra oil changes, and everything else that went along with it, we would see another major price spike everywhere. There are just not enough people on the road to pick up the slack for this. Logistically, it doesn't work, but then we add the finance aspect into it on top of everything else. So, that's what we see for that end of it. From the Associated Press, from car makers to refiners, industries brace for a rail strike. Actually, gonna skip over this one because we talked about this in the analysis from CNN. By the way, just so you know, it's allergy season again, so I'm getting the sniffles. From the Hill, Sanders blocks proposal to force rail unions to accept labor deal. From Alexander Bolton. Bernie Sanders on Wednesday blocked a Republican request to force railroad workers and companies to accept recommendations of a nonpartisan panel to avoid a strike that would impact millions of Americans. Sanders stood up on the floor to block the speedy approval of the resolution introduced by Richard Burr and Roger Wicker, that would require railroad workers to adopt the outlines of a labor deal. He argued the railroad companies are making huge profits and should start treating their workers more fairly.
The rail industry has seen huge profits in recent years, and last year alone made a record-breaking $20 billion in profit,
Sanders said.
Last year, the CEO of CSX made over $20 million in total compensation, while the CEOs of Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern made over $14 million each in compensation.
By contrast, Sanders said that workers in the freight rail industry are entitled to a grand total of 0 sick days. I've never worked on the rail industry, but I find that really hard to believe. Especially with the pinko pox running rampant off of this, because one infection, if it's especially as transmissible as it was, and if it's as dangerous as they say it is, could shut down an entire industry. I don't believe that for a second. GOP senators, however, say their resolution could avoid a disastrous rail strike, which would freeze rail travel and freight shipments around the country. The Turtle Man, Mitch McConnell, accused Democrats of putting the economy at risk after Sanders blocked the resolution.
Senate Democrats just blocked a bill that would give given railroad workers a big raise and prevented a crippling strike and supply chain crisis. If a strike occurs and paralyzes food, fertilizer, and energy shipments nationwide, it would be because Democrats blocked this bill, he tweeted.
The Burr-Wicker resolution would adopt the comprehensive recommendations by the Presidential Emergency Board, which Biden created to avert the strike. Those recommendations include a significant wage increase retroactive to 2020. Burr noted it would include a 24% increase in pay, annual bonuses of $1,000, and additional paid leave, which, by the way, because it sounds like what the recommendation from the PEB is what's going forward, that means a 24% increase in the cost of shipping your goods, which means it's probably not going to be 24%, but you're going to see more inflated prices on the fuel, on the fertilizer, and on the food itself. So, a Republican aide said Sanders' objection made the strike more likely. Bernie wants a strike, the aide said. Well, we'll see what happens with that. And we will briefly touch on this because right now we're just sitting to wait to see if this does get ratified by the members. From CNN, Amtrak cancels all long-distance trains as freight rail strike looms. Some travelers are scrambling as a possible freight railroad strike interrupts service along Amtrak's long-distance routes. Negotiations are ongoing between unions and railroad companies. If they don't come to an agreement, the first national rail strike in 30 years could start early on Friday. While Amtrak is not involved in the negotiations, service has already been adjusted on track that could be affected by the dispute. All long-distance Amtrak trains are canceled starting Thursday, September 15th. So, if you're planning on traveling west on Amtrak, you might want to fly. You should probably fly anyway, but you might want to fly. Alright, that's what the rail strike is looking like right now. We are kind of just sitting here waiting to see if the members ratify this deal that the leaders and the businesses and the Presidential Emergency Board did. I don't know. It seems like this is going to be a go, like they're going to almost be forced by their union leaders to just take the deal and shut up about it. But we'll see what happens with this. Let's read from the Blaze. And we do have some video to go with this too. Which is good because, allergy season means I might have to step up from my desk for a moment. Diversity hire totally flounders when reporter asks when Inflation Reduction Act will actually reduce inflation. From Chris Enlow. White House Press Secretary token diversity hire was tripped up Tuesday over how the Inflation Reduction Act will accomplish inflation reduction. Earlier in the day, the BLS published the Consumer Price Index showing a 0.1% inflation increase from July, a worrying sign especially amid dropping gas prices. The figure showed inflation grew 8.3% year over year. Even worse, the so-called core inflation, which excludes food and energy, grew by 0.6 from July. Yeah, we didn't talk about the core inflation when our great leader, our wonderful deity, Joe Biden.
Hey, look at me! Inflation was 0 this month, huh? Hey, aren't I amazing?
Democrats claim the Inflation Reduction Act, which Biden signed into law last month, would reduce inflation. So as inflation has only continued to increase, a reporter asked Diversity Hire at the press briefing when Americans can expect the promised inflation reduction. Let's listen. Is this... Let me see if this is just a non-populated tweet. No, but let's see also. Yep, here we go. They will queue us up to this point. So let's have a listen. Oh, she's given the black power fist.
Go ahead, and then I'll come back.
What exactly would the Inflation Reduction Act do to reduce inflation in the short term?
So when you look at the lowering costs in particular for Americans, I think that's important when you think about how inflation has increased costs for Americans. If you think about the $100 saving about $100 per year on premiums with ACA, when you think about lowering costs for our seniors, capping that at $2,000 a year instead of thousands and thousands of dollars a month, that lowering of cost as we deal with a time that is difficult for many Americans. Look, experts, economists has said themselves that this would be the Inflation Reduction Act would be beneficial to that extra $300 billion in deficit. That is really important as we have right now $1.7 billion in deficit deduction under this administration. It would help lower that even more, which is incredibly important. And so, look, we've heard from Republicans and Democrats who were U.S. Treasury secretaries who said it would lower inflation. We've heard from more than 126 economists said it would lower inflation. And so I think that is also an important fact that we point to when we talk about the importance of the Inflation Reduction Act, the importance of lowering costs for American families, even as you look at the energy costs as well.
But some of the savings that you're pointing to wouldn't kick in until 2024 or 2026. So is it fair to suggest to people that somehow they're going to see some inflation reduction right now while they're hurting the most?
Well, that is actually not true. So this is just for some folks who are watching. Consumers, families, and small businesses owners can head to cleanenergy.gov as it relates to the energy cost component, the lowering of cost, to learn more about how they can start saving money immediately thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, tax credits and rebates. That is real. Inflation Reduction Act credits and rebates available today include a 30% credit to cover the cost of installing rooftop solar, up to 10% credit to cover the cost of insulation materials and other energy efficient improvements like.
All right, I can't listen to this one anymore. That I hit my breaking point off of that. So, don't you remember? Well, obviously we remember Sarah Sanders and Kayleigh McEnany. Obviously we remember all that. But did you remember when Jen Psaki didn't have a clue, but could actually fake that she had a clue, I mean, we all knew she was full of crap, but she could at least fake it and get away with it. She could at least convince sycophants that she had a clue. This woman doesn't have a clue, and she's open about it. She has no idea. And I always love off this. Hey, when's inflation going to come down for people who are affected the most by this? Oh, I don't know. Why don't you go to this website and buy these government-sponsored solar panels and go put them up on your roof? I know you can't afford your groceries, but go buy the solar panels. So, yeah. All right, what else do we have? The oil reserves, speaking of energy. Another one from Reuters. U.S. emergency oil reserves tumbled to the lowest level since 1984. That's right. The strategic oil reserve is at the lowest point in my entire life. Because I was, of course, born in 1984. From Arathi Somasakar. U.S. emergency crude oil stocks fell 8.4 million barrels last week to 434.1 million barrels, their lowest since October of 1984. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, data released on Monday. The release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in the week ended September 9th was the steepest draw. Since May, it comprised about 6.3 million barrels of sweet crude and around 2 million barrels of sour crude. President Biden in March set a plan to release 1 million barrels per day over 6 months from the SPR to tackle high U.S. fuel prices, which it's still questionable whether or not that was constitutional for him to do, which have contributed to soaring inflation. The Biden admin is weighing the need for further SPR releases after the current program ends in October, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm told Reuters last week. A DOE spokesperson later said the White House at the time was not considering new releases beyond the 180 million barrels. The Biden admin is less likely to release barrels from the SPR after October if the benchmark futures continue to drop. But they're not. Last week, the 50-day moving average of U.S. and European prices both fell below the 200-day moving average, noted research analyst Paul Stanke. The SPR stocks also have declined due to sales from congressional mandates and Biden's price initiative. The oil is sold to qualified oil companies via online auctions, and the price is set using 5-day average bracketing at the date of delivery. The Department of Energy has proposed to replenish the SPR by allowing it to enter contracts to purchase oil in the future at years at fixed preset prices. The admin says it believes the plan would help boost domestic oil production. How? I don't know. But what we can say when we look at something like this is the fact that, I mean, the oil reserves were topped off. From what I understand, they were almost full 2 years ago. Under that those nice, lovely few weeks back in 2020, when there was next to no demand for fuel because we were all locked in our homes, except for those of us who didn't care and still tried to drive to Florida. Between that and the fact that OPEC had gone out and turned on the spigot as fast as it could go to try to screw over Russia. A strategic mind took advantage of that and filled up the strategic petroleum reserves, and now they're tapped down to lower than they were when that strategic mind took office. And that should be worrying. And as I remind you, this was only supposed to go to October, to the point where the catch-up would happen right around the time that midterms were over. All the voting was done for midterms. And that the oil companies in the U.S., who are providing and working as hard as they can to provide you with fuel at the lowest price possible, because remember, the less you have to think about going and filling up your car, the more these people make. They have to compete to make sure that they're the ones filling the strategic oil reserve again. Meanwhile, also trying to sell you oil, or gasoline, distilled from oil. This is a time bomb and a powder keg waiting to go off. From Markets Insider, oil prices could find a floor near $80 per barrel as Biden admin considers refilling the strategic petroleum reserve. Oil prices could be due for a rebound after falling from 30% since early June, according to a Tuesday note from Fairlead Strategies' Kate Stockton. She said WTI crude oil futures confirmed a short-term counter-trend buy signal on Monday, supporting the potential for an oversold bounce that lasts at least 2 weeks. The rebound follows a breach of long-term support that suggests a long-term trading range has taken hold in support near $85 a barrel, and minor resistance at the 50-day moving average, Stockton said. WTI's crude's 50-day moving average is currently about $94 a barrel, representing potential upside of about 4% from current levels. Yeah, those delightful few weeks that we had where it was $31 a barrel. I miss those days. Her bullish technical review on oil received a fundamental boost on Tuesday following a Bloomberg report. Hey, that's Ron Helton's favorite publication from his favorite politician. That said the Biden admin is considering a plan to refill the strategic petroleum reserve if oil falls to around $80 a barrel. WTI crude oil hit a low of $81.20 a barrel last week. The potential move by the Biden admin is seen as protecting U.S. oil production growth by preventing crude prices from plunging further. Are you stupid? I mean, we know the answer to that question, but via strategic releases of the oil reserve, the Biden admin is attempting to delicately balance a surge in oil prices and therefore a surge in inflation against a crash in oil prices that would negatively affect the U.S.-based oil sector and incentivize them to invest less in production at a time when U.S. energy independence is seen as a crucial national security issue. Are you stupid? The best thing that could happen to the U.S. economy right now is for oil to crash to the level that it was. And I understand that Insider is a left-wing publication. I do. But the best thing, and even the investors should know this, the best thing for the economy right now would honestly be for oil prices per barrel to drop below $20 a barrel, even temporarily. 50 cent a gallon gas, do you know what that would do to this economy? Since the start of the year, Biden admin has reduced U.S. crude oil in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to 442 million barrels from about 600 million barrels, according to data from Y Charts. The move was seen as a way for the admin to lessen the damage on consumer wallets at the gas pump as oil prices surged in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What about the surge that happened before that? Oh wait, no, we don't talk about that because that's not politically convenient. The move arguably worked. The U.S. gas prices have been consistently falling since June from an average high of more than $5 a gallon to just $3.71 per gallon today, according to data from AAA. Don't worry, that's coming back. But if the Biden admin is on the verge of strategically purchasing more than 100 million barrels of oil at $80 a barrel, a floor has likely been set in the oil market until the SPR is filled back up. I can't believe how market illiterate the people at Markets Insider are. But they're going to keep trying to tell you that Biden's a genius and he's doing this all the right way. And, well, I hope that you guys all did what I told you to and started stocking up on food at lower prices that isn't going to perish and isn't going to get freezer burned. Because this one's going to hurt. Alright, let's talk about some of the layoffs that are coming here. We're going to start with PEG, P-E-G. Today, the CEO of a publicly traded company was like, yes, we fired a bunch of people for being white, and apparently everyone's just shrugging their shoulders. And we have the message from Twilio CEO Jeff Lawson. And we also have a CNBC article that goes with this. From CNBC, Twilio to lay off 11% of its workforce. From Ashley Caput. Twilio will lay off 11% of its workforce as part of a major restructuring plan, according to an SEC filing published on Wednesday. Hey, but don't worry. These layoffs, they're not going to hurt anybody. Just a sec. That's what we wanted. $78.67 times 0.11, 11%. That is, if we go by the December 31st, 2021 number, 865, well, let's not talk about the third of a person. Let's go 866 people who now have to go on the unemployment line and wonder how they're going to afford their house, their car, and their groceries for their kids. The cloud communication software builder has been striving for profitability in 2023, and the restructuring aims to improve operating margins, create a better selling capacity, and reduce operating costs. In a letter to employees, Twilio CEO Jeff Lawson said the company decided to lay off staff in order to run more efficiently and to align the company's investments with its priorities. He said the decision was extremely difficult, but also wise and necessary. Twilio has grown at an astonishing rate over the past couple of years. It was too fast and without enough focus on our most important company priorities, Lawson said in the letter. I take responsibility for those decisions as well as the difficult decision to do this layoff. Lawson said the employees impacted are in areas of the company that can operate more efficiently and where customers can succeed without as much human intervention. Twilio said it expects to incur between $70 million and $90 million in charges related to the restructuring plans. Shares of Twilio closed up 10% on Wednesday. Now, mind you, 866 people are about to get the news that they're about to get the boot. But hey, the shares were up, right? Right? A message from Twilio CEO Jeff Lawson. Twillions. This is an email, by the way, that was sent out to all Twilio employees today from Twilio CEO Jeff Lawson. Over the years, we've made a lot of changes to the way Twilio operates and is organized, but none harder than what I'm sharing today. We made the extremely difficult decision to restructure and reduce Twilio's workforce by approximately 11%. Teammates and friends who helped to build Twilio. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. The layoff is the last thing we want to do, but I believe it's wise and necessary. Twilio has grown at an astonishing rate over the past couple of years. It was too fast and without enough focus on our most important company priorities. I take responsibility for those decisions as well as the difficult decision to do this layoff. Before I get into the details, I want to answer the obvious question, which is likely on your mind. Am I impacted? In the U.S., impacted Twilians will get an email within the next 60 minutes letting them know their role has been impacted and outlining the next steps. Twilians who are impacted will also be able to meet with a leader from their team or an HR BP today. Outside the U.S., Twilio operates in 20 countries, so notifications and next steps will vary based on local laws and practices. Regardless, all Twilians whose roles are or may be impacted outside the U.S. can expect an email or meeting invitation within the next 2 hours. For Twillions in all region, if you don't receive one of these emails or meeting invitations in the next 2 hours, it means your role has not been impacted. Let me start by stating the obvious. Ideally, everyone would be hearing this news directly from their manager, but that would have left many Twillions waiting anxiously for an extended period of time. The process differs by country, but we want to give clarity as quickly as possible. Why we're taking the step: Twilio has always been a growth company, and as you know, we're committed to being a profitable growth company. At our scale, being profitable will make us stronger. It requires us to ask more rigorously which activities and investments are working. It forces us to ask where we've had a good alignment internally to amplify each of our efforts. This discipline requires us to ask if our investments are getting us to where we need to go. As we've discussed frequently, we have 4 priorities for reaching profitability and leading in customer engagement: investing in our platform reliability and trust, increasing the profitability of messaging, accelerating segment adoption, and scaling Flex customer base. Today's layoffs are about aligning our investments more squarely with our priorities, as well as running our company more efficiently overall. How did we decide which roles would be impacted? This was tremendously difficult. For those impacted, we applied a rigorous selection process to examine which roles were most tightly aligned to our 4 priorities. Similarly, we looked at the size of our investments we've made and whether they are working for our company. We ultimately found that some investments no longer make sense and identified areas where we can be more efficient. By no fault of the Twillions impacted today, we've curtailed our investment in areas of go-to market where customers can succeed without as much human intervention, as well as making targeted changes to be more efficient in the areas of research and development and growth and acceleration. And here it is. As you all know, we are committed to becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppression company. Layoffs like this can have a more pronounced impact on marginalized communities, so we are particularly focused on ensuring our layoffs, while business necessity today, are carried out through an anti-racist, anti-oppression lens. Yeah, you know what that means. I know what that means. We're making our layoffs, we're making our choices to be actively anti-racist. It's coming, folks. All right, more coming off of this here from Patagonia from CNBC. Patagonia founder just donated the entire company worth $3 billion to fight climate change. From Laura Kolodny. Patagonia founder Yvonne Chouinard, his spouse and 2 adult children, are giving away their ownership in the apparel maker that he started some 50 years ago, dedicating all profits from the company to projects and organizations that will protect wildland and biodiversity and fight the climate crisis. Excuse me. The company is worth about $3 billion, according to the New York Times, a former newspaper. In a letter about the decision published on the Patagonia website on Wednesday, Chouinard wrote of reimagining capitalism and said, "While we're doing our best to address the environmental crisis, it's not enough. We needed to find a way to put more money into fighting the crisis while keeping the company's values intact. One option was to sell Patagonia and donate all the money, but we couldn't be sure a new owner would maintain our values or keep our team of people around the world employed. Another path was to take the company public. What a disaster that would have been. Oh yeah, no, people could go back out and invest and get you a lot more money that you could go back and donate to a cause like that. What a nightmare! Even public companies with good intentions are under too much pressure to create short-term gain at the expense of long-term vitality and responsibility. Truth be told, there were no good options available, so we created our own. The privately held company stock will now be owned by a climate-focused trust and group of nonprofit organizations called the Patagonia Purpose Trust and the Hold Fast Collective, respectively. The company said in a statement, noting that every dollar that is not reinvested back into Patagonia will be distributed as dividends to protect the planet. Short answer? If you want to go back out and buy Patagonia, which after this, I don't know why the hell you would, that price is set to triple within the next year. For special interests. I've never owned anything Patagonia because I'm poor. But trust funders will be out there ready to go. Let's talk about immigration. From Fox News. Ron DeSantis sends 2 planes of illegal immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. From Jessica Chasmeyer. I don't know why I said that like I was asking a question, but apparently I thought there was going to be another line there. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis followed through on his promise to drop off illegal immigrants in progressive states, sending 2 planes full of migrants to Martha's Vineyard on Wednesday. A video provided to Fox News Digital shows the migrants deboarding the planes at Martha's Vineyard Airport in Massachusetts. Yes, Florida can confirm the 2 planes with illegal immigrants have arrived in Martha's Vineyard today. We're part of the state's relocation program to transport illegal immigrants to sanctuary destinations, the governor's communications director, Taryn Fensky, told Fox News Digital. States like Massachusetts, New York, and California will better facilitate care of these individuals who they have invited to our country by incentivizing illegal immigration through their designation as sanctuary states and support for the Biden admin's open border policies. Who is she? Did I miss a name somewhere? Oh, communications director, Taryn Fensky. I thought that was DeSantis himself saying that. That's why I'm like, why is there she there? As you may know, this past legislative session, the Florida legislature appropriated $12 million to implement a program to facilitate the transport of illegal immigrants from the state consistent with federal law, she added. The Office of Mass Governor Charlie Baker responded to an after-hours email from Fox News Digital saying it was aware of the situation and that the arrivals were provided short-term shelter. The Baker-Polito administration is in touch with local officials regarding the arrival of migrants in Martha's Vineyard. Terry McCormick, Baker's press secretary, wrote, "At this time, short-term shelter services are being provided by local officials, and the administration will continue to support these efforts." Fox News Digital reported in April that Florida's budget, since approved by the state legislature, included $12 million for the Florida Department of Transportation to remove illegal immigrants from the state and relocate them. Martha's Vineyard is famously known as the playground of rich progressives, including former President Barack Obama, who bought a multi-million-dollar house there in 2019. DeSantis, a Republican, proposed Delaware or Martha's Vineyard as a destination for such migrants, but his office explained at the time that they could also be sent to other progressive states whose governors endorsed blatant violations of federal immigration law. It's not the responsibility of Floridians to subsidize aliens to reside in our state unlawfully. We do not consent to Biden's open borders agenda, the governor's office said at the time. In November, DeSantis said dozens of migrant flights landed in Florida at the behest of the Biden admin, and he threatened at the time to send them to Delaware on buses. Meanwhile, Greg Abbott began sending thousands of illegal immigrants to Washington, D.C. in April as the migrant crisis overwhelmed border states. In August, buses from Texas started heading to New York City and Chicago. Arizona has also sent buses to Washington. Vice President Harris, who was put in charge of tackling the border crisis by President Biden shortly after they assumed office in 2021, sparked a firestorm this week after she twice declared the U.S. southern border is secure, while admin officials estimate an average of 55,000 so-called gotaways each month. Illegal immigrants who successfully make it into the country without being detained. So, a couple things for that, and we will be talking a bit more about this Martha's Vineyard here, but I do have problems with this. Ultimately, I think this is the best solution, but there are problems with this as well. Number one, it is after Labor Day. Now, had DeSantis done this in May, June, first, of course, he would be going on the coattails of his other staunch MAGA people that he follows in the footsteps of. I'm not a DeSantis fan, by the way, just so you know. I'm not a DeSantis stan. I'm not a DeSantis fan. But when I look at something like this, the rich people, the sanctuary city people, the people who say, oh yes, you poor people down in Florida and Texas, in your border towns, you must take in all of the people over we must be an open border sanctuary country because you can handle these people. Yes, you can let them come in. That's who DeSantis is trying to target with this. But it is after. It's after Labor Day, which means the rich people in Massachusetts are getting ready to go back to their summer homes in Florida. A lot of them possibly being rich donors. The only people left in Martha's Vineyard right now, and Martha's Vineyard's Gazette actually points this out, are the people who live there year-round, which are mostly the workers. The people who have the multi-million-dollar mansions, like the Obamas, they don't live there year-round. It's too cold. They go summer in a place like Arizona or Florida. Typically Florida if they're coming out of Martha's Vineyard because Arizona's too dry for them. Or Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, Malibu. So the only people who are going to be affected by this are the workadays. Let's see. Southpaw, from the Martha's Vineyard Times. State Rep Dylan Fernandez arrived on Wednesday evening and visited the church to assess the situation. It appears that one, if not many, Republican governors or operatives chartered flights from the South to come and drop undocumented or documented, I'm not sure, immigrants on Martha's Vineyard, he said. These governors, or whoever it is, all they care about is scoring some political points on Tucker Carlson, Fox News, and the fact that they're using human lives, women, children, men, as pawns, and just really abusing the people, dropping them off in a place where they don't know where they are, with no food and no water, just to be able to get on Tucker Carlson and Fox News' good graces is disgusting. That's inhumane. These people claim to be Christians. This is about as unchristian a thing as you could be doing. It's evil. Meanwhile, the progressives in Massachusetts say that the entire country should be a sanctuary and we should have open arms and welcome in all immigrants. And here we have a state rep from Falmouth who can't even open up his arms and say, yes, we will take care of you. Just the other guy is disgusting. The full article here from Martha's Vineyard Times. A group of 50 Venezuelan migrants, some of them children, landed at Martha's Vineyard. On Wednesday, the migrants arrived by plane at Martha's Vineyard Airport. According to Jeff Freeman, airport director at Martha's Vineyard Airport, the name of the charter was Ultra Air Charters. He said it was 2 planes that arrived at the airport, and not one as was originally reported. Fox News is reporting that DeSantis is taking credit for sending the migrants to the island and shared the video with that news outlet. In 2021, DeSantis vowed to spend $8 million to send immigrants out of the state and mentioned that the vineyard as a destination. His press office did not immediately respond to a request for comments. Who shoulders that $8 million, by the way? And again, this is something that I'm very much in favor of. But I also have the questions. Who shoulders the burden? Who takes care of that money? Where does that money come from? Yes, it is good and right that the illegal migrants that were invited in by the progressives go to their sanctuary cities and live among the people who might have invited them to be here. I am very much in favor of that. But I have other questions among this, and again, the big question that I have here is why this didn't happen while all the pinky up rich folks were in Martha's Vineyard. Although I can imagine that if all these jobs are taken away from the regular workadays, because, hey, I mean, we all know that illegal migrant labor is much, much less expensive than a progressive college student who says, I demand a living wage. That would be a little bit poetic. Let's see. The Times is told the refugees arrived via Texas, but the situation has been fluid, and there's been a lot of confusion surrounding today's events. The Times is told it was a company that organized the flights, providing individuals with some cell phone numbers before departing. Migrants used translation apps on those phones getting off the plane. And this is also the statement that we just read. A spokesman for Charlie Baker issued a statement late Wednesday morning. The Baker-Polito administration is in touch with local officials regarding the arrival of migrants in Martha's Vineyard. At this time, short-term shelter services are being provided by local officials, and the admin will continue to support these efforts. Now, interestingly enough, with Martha's Vineyard, they keep referring to this as an island, which is also an interesting strategy with this. Let's actually get the map up of this. So as far as Martha's Vineyard, now, we've got the pin in here, so we'll come back to that in just a sec. Where most of them are going when they're coming out of Texas and Arizona, they're going to the District of Columbia, Chicago, and the city of New York. So they're going out to places that are easily connected by bus, but also to places where they can go spread out. We see some of this with Muriel Bowser trying to put them into Burr Ridge, which is not a sanctuary city, in a county that's also not a sanctuary, because she doesn't want to have them in her sanctuary city. But when we look at Martha's Vineyard here on the map, one of the things to note is that there's no real easy way for any of the migrants who are coming here to come back off without getting back up on another plane or a ferry, which we do see several ferry lines that are running up to Nantucket or back up to Woods Hole, obviously the Falmouth region, or coming back out to Yarmouth further down the Cape. So there's not a huge, easy way for them to come back off and go run and spread themselves out into Providence or Hartford, or even down to the city of New York at some point, which I do consider to be somewhat interesting. That's what we see coming off of that. Alright, what else do we have? Some political news from the Blaze is the red wave crashing. Polling experts say critical warning sign is flashing again, and it's not good for Democrats. This is from Chris Enlow. As the 2022 midterm election nears, polls increasingly indicate that Democrats will be more competitive than previously thought. The red tsunami, which once looked menacing, now appears to be nothing more than a small ripple. But polling expert Nate Cohn explains this week a key warning sign is flashing again, suggesting polls are overestimating Democrats' prospects. Well, they do typically tend to oversample Democrats, so there's a side of that. Red-haired bobblehead, the former White House press secretary turned MSDNC employee, claimed Tuesday that the election forecasts have flipped now, showing Democrats in the driver's seat less than 2 months from Election Day. Indeed, polls are increasingly showing Democrats may not lose control of the Senate and potentially even the House, but those polls do not tell the whole story. Cohen wrote the New York Times, ahead of the 2020 presidential election, Joe Biden was outperforming then-President Trump in many of the same regions of the country where polls overestimated support for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election. Such overestimation in favor of Democrats appears to be happening again. That warning sign is flashing again. Democrat Senate candidates are outrunning expectations in the same places where the polls overestimated Mr. Biden in 2020 and Mrs. Clinton in 2016, Cohen wrote. Cohen highlighted one Senate race in particular, Ron Johnson's battle against Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin, as a potential bellwether for bad polling after a recent Marquette Law School showed Barnes leading Johnson by a significant margin of 7 points. Cohen explains, but in this case, good for Wisconsin Democrats might be too good to be true. The state was ground zero for survey error in 2020 when the pre-election polls proved to be too good to be true for Mr. Biden. In the end, the polls overestimated Mr. Biden by about 8 points. Eerily enough, Mr. Biden is faring better than expected by a similar margin. The Wisconsin data is just one example of a broader pattern across the battlegrounds. The more polls overestimated Mr. Biden last time, the better Democrats seem to be doing relative to expectations. And conversely, Democrats are posting less impressive numbers in some of the states where the polls were fairly accurate 2 years ago, like Georgia. When Cohen plotted the places where polls overestimated Democrats, he discovered a consistent link between Democrat strength today and polling errors 2 years ago. According to Cohen, persistent and unaddressed biases in survey methodology, like non-response bias, is causing pollsters to derive misleading polls. What this means practically, he explained, is that what appears to be Democratic strength in the run-up to the election could actually be nothing more than a mirage. With that being said, there are a few things to consider that I think that even Cohen is not considering back out of this, nor are the Democrats. The Democrats think that religiously, if they say 10,000 Hail Joe Bidens before Election Day, then they will sweep 435 seats in the House, and every Senate seat that's up will be a Democrat pickup. They actually believe this. It is a religious movement at this point. There are some things to consider, though. One of the big things is that neither Biden or Trump are on the ballot. Now, giving a mandate to Biden is on the ballot. And as much as they've desperately tried, as much as they've desperately flailed, as much as they screamed to try to keep Trump on the ballot with the Mar-a-Lago raid, with everything else, and there is a reason, by the way, strategically, I'm not talking about the Mar-a-Lago raid. It's not that it doesn't interest me, because of the fact that the Democrat Party is using the DOJ to go after our political enemy. It's the fact that we are in midterm season, and we need to be focusing on the failures of the Biden admin right now. We've got a block of video where we'll be doing just that, and I think I might skip ahead to that because I know I've got a few things I like and things that I hate today. So we'll probably have an extended period at the end of that, but to pay attention to what's going on with this. Number one, this is going to be far, far, far more individual, with the exception of the couple statewide races that we're seeing in battleground areas. I think most of your Senate seats are safe for the directions that they're going. But we've got battlegrounds like here in Wisconsin. That's going to be one to watch. Our governorship is going to be one to watch. And the Biden admin just keeps having problems over and over again. He cannot get a handle on inflation. And he just came out on the edge of saying, screw you, union workers, just go back to work and suck it up. And we still don't know if that's going to clear or not. And if it doesn't, wait for your prices to go up one more time in a large chunk before everyone gets out to vote. This is a toss-up like I have never seen in any of my years paying attention to politics, or even in any of my years of analyzing politics. This is a toss-up. I can't even tell you what's going to happen on election night. I know a lot of people are trying to make their official predictions. I can't tell you. There's too many variables, and there are too many things that could go wrong for both parties between here and the first Tuesday of November. So we will watch this and see what happens with this. Let's talk about the Queen. because her funeral procession went on. From the Daily Wire, watch Queen's Guard collapses in front of her coffin. From Ryan Saavedra. Is it the jab? The Daily Mail reported that the live stream feed was cut for several minutes while first responders rushed in to help the man. Let's watch. Let's watch that again! It's this dude right here. I was watching the guy with the bearskin over here. It's this dude right here. I know it's weird to look, but like if we back out to this, it looks... I can't tell what that is, and the tracking bar is there, so we can't see it anyway. But it almost looked a little bit like there's an arrow in his back. I know that's nearly impossible, but... Another one from Disclose.tv. Wider angle. Does not appear that there's any detail in the Daily Wire article about what happened to him. The holy jab. Well, let's look at the Daily Mail here. Drama as guard faints off the podium while holding vigil beside Queen's coffin in Westminster Hall. From Jamie Phillips for Mail Online. A guard has fainted off the podium while holding vigil next to the Queen's coffin as she lies in state inside the Palace of Westminster. Hundreds of thousands of mourners have been queuing to pay their final respects to the monarch following the death at Balmoral on Thursday. But onlookers were aghast when a guard began swaying on his feet moments before he collapsed. The man had moments earlier briefly stepped off the podium before retaking his place as other servicemen joined him for a changeover. But seconds later he blacked out and fell forwards, landing sprawled on the stone floor to loud gasps from bystanders queuing to pay their respects. The live stream also cut out for several minutes as police rushed to the man's aid. The Queen's coffin, which has been placed in a raised platform called a catafalque, is being guarded round the clock by units from the Sovereign's Bodyguard, the Household Division, or Yeoman Warders of the Tower of London. It comes after crowds lined the streets in central London as she was moved from Buckingham to Westminster on Wednesday afternoon. King Chuck, Bill, and Harry reunited to mourn and marched behind the coffin. As it made its final journey out of Buckingham Palace at 2:22 p.m. A short service was held involving the royal family at the Palace of Westminster before members of the public were given access to pay their respects from 5 p.m. As the late monarch's coffin was placed in the hall, photos captured a poignant moment for the Duke of Sussex as he held his head in his hand, shielding his eyes and looking down. Wearing a suit dedicated with medals, he is standing next to the Duchess of Sussex, who is looking down with a somber expression on his face. Harry and his brother Bill stood together with their wives, Meghan and Kate, as they put aside their bitter feud to pay their respects for their grandmother. Still, by the way, no mention as to what happened with this guard. So, no idea. Would really not mind seeing and figuring out what it was that caused the guy to just drop like that because he blacked out. Low blood sugar, fatigue. But these people train to stand like that for years and years on end. Oh, is it that common? I guess I didn't know that. But that's what we see for that. Poor guy. Alright, let's do these two. We'll watch these video clips, and then we'll do things that I like and one thing that I hate. Because we're not in enough issue in the rest of the world right now. From the Hill. Senators introduced bill designated Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. And who is front and center off of this? By the way, this is bipartisan, but still. Who is front and center off of this? Who is front and center on a move that is extremely warmongering and likely to anger and put us up into another war, while he continues to make millions off of defense contractors? None other than our friend Lindsey Graham. Why do we keep having to talk about this moron? Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal on Wednesday introduced a bill that would designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism, just a few months after the Senate Judiciary Committee members called on Biden administration to do so. The monoparty bipartisan duo is seeking to make Russia the fifth addition to the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism, joining North Korea, Iran, Syria, and Cuba. The designation would eliminate Russia's sovereign immunity before U.S. courts and reduce foreign assistance and exports to the country, according to a release. And also, probably make it a lot harder on Europe in the winter. The newly introduced Russia as a State Sponsor of Terrorism Act follows a resolution passed by the Senate in late July that called on Secretary of State Anthony Blinken to impose the designation on Russia. Sugar, if Russian President Vladimir Putin's regime is not a state sponsor of terrorism after all this, then that designation is meaningless. And, I'll let his regime invade my Donbass region, okay? Look at him on the back of that bear. Sugar. But Biden, earlier this month, said he did not think Russia should get the designation. White House Press Secretary Token Diversity Hire said in a recent briefing that the president thinks the move is not the most effective or strongest path forward to hold Russia accountable and could not have unintended consequences to Ukraine and the world. Yeah, not to Ukraine, but to the other people who are supposed to be buying their gas. What was the ultimatum that Russia gave to Germany on Nord Stream 1? Oh, hey. I'm sorry, let me put on the accent. Hey, you lift sanctions, or you get no gas. You put on more sanctions, I take away more gas. The designation could curb the U.S.'s ability to deliver aid to Ukraine and facilitate food exports from the country, jeopardizing a recent deal to allow some exports through the blockaded Black Sea, Diversity Hire said. The senators introduced their bill just a week after Biden dismissed their resolution. Russia has more than earned the right to be among the club of pariah nations, Blumenthal said. You dumb morons. And Lindsey Graham looked at this and said, those painting the Donald Trump out there with Vladimir Putin. Look how ripped he is out there. Man, I wish that was me out there painted up with Vladimir. And this one was just funny. This almost got into the stack of thing I like stuff. But I chose against it, and there's another one, automotive. Because I am a car guy. There is another one, automotive, that I want to touch on instead. But from Fox 2, KTVU. Catalytic converters stolen from several marked SFPD vehicles. Yeah, you better keep that Soros DA in place. And wonder why your crime is so brazen that they will go right up to the cop car and take the catalytic converters off of it. From Christian Captain and VU staff. Several marked San Francisco police vehicles were struck by thieves who stole their catalytic converters, the police department said. According to police, on Monday at around 1 p.m., an officer discovered that a marked police truck parked in the area of 16th Street and DeHaro Street was missing its catalytic converter. Oh yeah, I'm sure he started it up and heard. Sorry for your ears for that. The officer went and inspected the other police vehicles in the area and found that another marked police truck and 2 marked police vans had their catalytic converters cut out. The incident was first reported by Mission Local, which said that thefts happened outside the police department's Special Operations Bureau building at 17th and DeHaro. The building also houses the SWAT team and bomb squad. There are multiple surveillance cameras positioned at the corner where the thefts occurred, but it's unclear whether those cameras captured video of the crime or the suspects. So far, there have been no arrests in the case, and hey, even if there were, your DA will just come back and turn them back out onto the street. Nice. I'm stealing that. I am stealing that joke. That's funny. Police had nothing to go on. Alright. As if you didn't already hate the world enough already, because we're watching this, let's watch Libs of TikTok! Libs of TikTok, non-binary person who goes by Zer, is upset that people keep misgendering Zer.
Oh, thank you so much for asking about my pronouns. Everyone misgenders me on my comments, and it means so much that you asked and you're trying to be respectful, so I love you for that. So I use the pronoun Zer. I chose these pronouns because in my head, they, them, as a non-binary person means like no gender, but Zer for me feels like it's like sliding, like Z.
A chick. You're a chick. You are very clearly a chick too, by the way. Your voice, your memories, your hair, you are not non-binary.
He and Zer very similar to he and him and she and her, and I just preferred that. So obviously Z can be used in replace of she, him, and they, and then Zer is used in replace of the other ones. Oh, thank you so much for asking about my pronouns.
I like this comment out here. Marvin Garden says, can anyone tell me WTF Zer even means? And David Wells comes back and says, it means their parents convinced them that they're the most special, wonderful, amazing person, and they're so unique and different that everyone should care about them more than anyone else, and they're narcissists. You get a like from that? And someone else comes back along with this and says, no, I think it's people who are otherwise unremarkable, the lonely, invisible kids with below average looks and below average intelligence, who have no parental expectations, or none they could meet. The kids who ate their boogers even though it meant social rejection. Alright, we've got more Libs of TikTok. So this I wanted to put this in here today, but I do want to follow up on this a little bit because I'm actually going to put a bookmark into this one and we'll touch on this a little bit more today, but I wanted to put this one out here for now. Breaking email obtained by Real Chris Rufo shows the Boston police confirming they did not receive a 911 call about a bomb threat at Boston Children's. Many questions remain. Will any journalists investigate? I will. I don't know how far I'll be able to go while still working a full-time job, but I will investigate this. Because if this didn't happen, Well, I mean, number one, that shoots my theory in the foot that if they want to go back to, and I really should stop sharing out the FBI building address with the way that the lefts and the progressives have stoked up fear against the FBI. I should maybe stop doing that because I have a feeling at some point this is going to be against YouTube terms of service. But here is the email chain that goes with this. On Wednesday, September 7th, 2022, 1:41 p.m., John Boyle. The investigation remains open. The bomb threat did not come through 911. Hello, Sergeant Boyle. Thanks for the quick response. When you say there are no records responsive for the 911 call, does that mean there's no record of a call or that it can't be found? I'm also wondering what the status of the investigation is. Have any suspects been identified? Replying to another chain that says, attached to the incident report, there are no records responsive for the 911 call. I got this feeling this entire thing was completely made up. How was Boston police tipped off to a supposed bomb threat, which turned out to be a false alarm at BCH? I don't know. I have no idea what's in this video, by the way. I know that a lot of people are talking about it as power corrupting. I didn't watch this video before this. So, Libertarian Party of Delaware. Seems like an odd place to put a Libertarian Party. But I digress. Tweets out with this video, power corrupts. And again, I'm watching this for the first time, so if I act shocked or indifferent to this, my apologies, because I have no idea what this particular officer is about to say.
PSA to everyone out there. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm probably speaking for a large majority of other officers out there. If we're driving on the freeway in our police car, get the out of the way. Get the out of the way. If you merge and we follow behind you and we merge too, you're probably in trouble. The best way to find that out is get the out of the way. I can go 90 miles an hour. You can't. You can't do that. So get the out of the way.
Actually, I can. Unfortunately, because of computer limiters, that's all I can go, but actually I can. And I can probably outdrive you. Got a lot of practice.
Okay. If us officers stay behind you long enough, we can find a reason to pull you over.
Ah, there it is. The quiet part out loud right then and there. Bring me the man and I will find you the crime. And of course, on the other average of most of us, whether we intend to or not, commit 3 felonies a day.
So you might as well get the out of the way. Super simple. That's all. You're welcome. PSA to everyone out there. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm probably speaking for a large majority of other officers out there. If we're driving on the freeway in our police car, get the out of the way. Get the out of the way. If you merge and we follow behind you and we merge too, you're probably in trouble. The best way to find that out is get the out of the way. I can go 90 miles an hour. You can't. You can't do that. So get the out of the way. If us officers stay behind you long enough, we can find a reason to pull you over. So you might as well get the out of the way.
Yeah, somebody needs to go talk to that person's supervisor, because that's the person on a power trip. Some of the commentary that comes with this, it's easy to focus on the threat she's making here, but the real problem is how separated from the civilian population this officer feels she is. Federal training and requirements attached to federal funding have built a red versus blue mindset into the public safety community. Incrementally and quietly, the federal government has been generating dependence on grant funding and assets within the local emergency services, building loyalty to federal initiatives instead of local communities. That is fair. Which is why I, again, continue to push for the idea of having an elected official be the head of police departments, like a sheriff, rather than an appointed lackey of whoever the executive administration is, as in a Metro Police Department, or the State Patrol, or the FBI. Through this dependency and training, small, federally loyal armies have grown right into the heart of every town in this country. All it takes is a national declaration of emergency for them to turn on their neighbors with the funding that supports their employment on the line. Yeah, I'd like to get federal funding out of that, too. Big thanks to archetypal dork for teaching us this stuff. And, well, on the other side of this, there's the other side that they say they're going to jump off their soapbox here, but they're the LP, so they're never going to be off their soapbox. So that's what we have for that. And Mazie Hirono will get last word before we do Thing I Like and Thing That I Hate, because we haven't talked about Mazie Hirono for quite a while. Tom Elliott tweets out, Senator Mazie Hirono, fighting the pro-life movement is literally a call to arms in our country.
When I hear my colleagues talking about how, it should be states' rights or government should not be telling us what to do, the word hypocrites, it doesn't even go far enough to call them out on what they're doing. This is an outright attack on women in this country. That is how I see it. That is how more and more women and those who support our right to make decisions about our own bodies, that is how we see it. And why? Because that's what's happening. Madam President, I yield the floor, but clearly, this is a literally call to arms in our country. Yield the floor.
A call to arms, you say? Boy, that sounds like a call to action. That sounds like something that would normally get somebody like me, if I were to say something as stupid as that, banned from both Twitter, YouTube, probably Twitch. That might actually get me taken off DLive. But because it's coming from a senator, it's that's just fine. That's fine. Don't worry about that. And who's going to be called to arms when Mazie Hirono wants to go back and fight against her political enemies like this, who include the pro-life movement, but also include people who have that flag behind them. People who fly that flag. People who say taxation is theft. You know who she's going to call to fight against these people?
PSA to everyone out there. I'm speaking for myself, but I'm probably speaking for a large majority of other officers out there. If we're driving on the freeway in our police car, get the out of the way. Get the out of the way. If you merge and we follow behind you and we merge too, you're probably in trouble. Best way to find that out is get the out of the way. I can go 90 miles an hour. You can't. You can't do that. So get the out of the way. If us officers stay behind you long enough, we can find a reason to pull you over. So you might as well get the out of the way. Super simple. That's all. You're welcome.
That's who she's going to send.
PSA to everyone.
And probably that one, too. Most likely. Alright. And that's not even the thing that I hate, by the way. But we've got, actually, oddly enough, 3 things I like. 3! And 1 thing I hate. Alright, thing that I like number 1. This is hilarious. Freedom, who has been shadow banned once, indicated by the X, at Always in America says Tesla service vehicle is and I want to point out because I know this model here, a gas guzzling Ford. That's right. They're not sending a Tesla out to go and service your lithium ion battery, change your tire, adjust your key fob, or whatever else you need to have done on the side of the road in your Tesla. Your Tesla service vehicle is a Ford. with an internal combustion engine. On that particular model, it's a 4-cylinder. That's just funny. And the internal combustion, and I'm guessing in the back there's also another internal combustion engine, because typically when they do that, they don't run the electrical system like the charging system or whatnot if they have to go charge the batteries. They don't run that off of the alternator on the van. There's probably a second Kubota internal combustion engine in the back that runs the generator that charges the batteries. That's funny. I like that. All right, thing I like number 2. So this has actually been floating around in the stack for a couple days. I have looked into this. I decided I enjoyed this, and if I did have to wait long enough on this, that this got to thing I like and thing that I hate, that I wanted to put this on thing that I like. U.S. Marshals credit Mama Bear as driving force in solving cold case murder, assisting in arrest of most wanted fugitive 3,000 miles away. From Paul Saka. A determined mother assisted law enforcement in making the arrest of an elusive suspect accused of murdering her daughter. In June of 2016, Crystal Mitchell and her then-boyfriend Raymond McLeod went from Arizona to visit friends in San Diego. A friend found Mitchell brutally beaten and strangled to death in a bedroom of the apartment they were staying at, according to investigators. McLeod, 37, was the prime suspect in the murder of the 20-year-old mother of 2, and a warrant for his arrest was issued, but he vanished. The murder case went cold when law enforcement couldn't track down McLeod, a former Marine. Frustrated with the progress in solving the murder of her daughter, Josephine Wenzel took it upon herself to hunt down Crystal's killer. Wenzel, who worked in Guam as a former police detective, used her expertise to help authorities locate McLeod. Wenzel, who's been raising her daughter's 2 children for the past 6 years, enrolled in classes to learn how to use the internet and social media to track down people online, according to ABC News. They have those classes? The grieving yet determined mother credits her inner mama bear for having the passion and persistence to solve her daughter's murder. It's not about being a former detective, Wenzel told Good Morning America. It's about being a mom. It's that mama bear. It's that mom determination that I gave birth to this child, so help me God, I'm going to take care of this child until I die. Authorities believe McLeod fled to Mexico, but couldn't locate him. Law enforcement said there were sightings of McLeod in Belize, Guatemala, and Mexico, but nothing led to his apprehension. He was on the U.S. Marshals list of 15 most wanted fugitives. Finally, on August 29th, authorities arrested McLeod in El Salvador, roughly 3,000 miles away from the crime scene. He was reportedly teaching English to locals under an assumed name. He really laid low and didn't pop his head up a whole lot. He obviously had some training in clandestine operations and things like that, and I'm sure he's referred to, said Joseph O'Callahan, Chief Deputy of the U.S. Marshals Service. During a press conference on Friday, U.S. Marshal's office credited Wenzel for helping them track down McLeod. The U.S. Marshals Service proclaimed Wenzel as a driving force in the arrest of McLeod. Now, even though we talked about this crazy lady, why is there a Lola Bunny challenge? Bunnies frighten me, by the way. Even though we said things about this crazy lady when we talked about police officers, there's a difference here. Now, under the arm of the law, retaliatory justice, and also foreign customs, there would be no way for Wenzel to go back out and make this arrest herself, bring this person back in, or go out and retaliate against him for justice. That is where you do use the government, when you know that you've been wronged, and this person will get a fair trial in this country once he's extradited and brought back. But we also see the private citizen aspect of it, doing the things that the law cannot, or in most cases will not. And I like that. I do enjoy the fact that when the government does fail, the private citizenry can still step up and will step up. They will step back when the situation needs to be stepped back from, when they can't go back and execute a warrant or extradite a person or just go down into El Salvador and outright kill a person. They will use the arm of the law for that, but the fact that this woman stepped up, really stepped up, and took her responsibility seriously where the U.S. Marshals failed her. I like that. I enjoy that. And thing that I like, number 3. From WESH2. Watch, Chick-fil-A employee tackles carjacker outside Florida restaurant, deputies say. From WFLA web staff. So not only will they come back out and change your tire on a Saturday, as long as you don't go there on a Sunday, and then buff the rim of your car after they change the tire, and go out of their way to do anything else for you, apparently they will stop you from getting robbed. A Florida Chick-fil-A employee is being hailed as a hero after deputies said he stopped a carjacking outside the fast food restaurant. Okaloosa County deputies said the young employee rushed outside Fort Walton Beach area restaurant to help a screaming woman holding a baby after a man grabbed her keys and he tried to take her car. Investigators say the woman was getting the baby out of her car when a man identified as William Branch walked up to her wielding a stick and demanded her keys. Branch then grabbed the car keys from the waistband of the woman's pants, opened her car door, and got inside the car, investigators said. When the woman began screaming for help, deputies say the Chick-fil-A employee ran to intervene. Deputies said Branch punched the employee in the face, but the employee was not seriously injured. The employee told deputies that Branch had been involved in another incident shortly before the carjacking attempt. A video the sheriff's office shared on Facebook shows the employee and Branch sprawling in the parking lot. The video shows the employee holding Branch down while others run over to help. Deputies said Branch was charged with carjacking with a weapon and battery. Let's watch, because, of course, video shared by the sheriff's department shows the entire thing happening. Oh, and Azov is also trending, by the way. So there we go. 2 big incidences out there where the private citizenry stepped in, especially coming from a Chick-fil-A too. That is awesome to see. I'm happy to see that. That really is. Look at him go. So, the day is saved, once again, by Chick-fil-A. Alright, now let's do a thing that I hate. And of course, we have to go back to electioneering. Reading today from the Daily Wire. DOJ blocks disclosure of a plan to combat obstacles to free and fair elections. Honkity honk honk, honk honk, honk 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 from Tim Pierce. The DOJ is claiming a 15-page plan to promote voting access and other election-related initiatives cannot be released to the public because of presidential communications privileges. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division last week denied a government watchdog's request to release the department's strategic plan on promoting access to voting. The Foundation for Government Accountability submitted a public records request known as a FOIA for the document last year after President Biden signed an EO directing every federal department to draft a plan to promote voter registration and participation as well as combat election misinformation. The FGA followed up with its FOIA request with a lawsuit on April 20th, after months of silence from the DOJ, according to the Washington Examiner. A district court ordered the DOJ to turn over requested records by September 8th. In a letter sent Thursday to FGA, Civil Rights Division Chief Killian Cagle said the DOJ's 15-page voter access plan is protected from FOIA requests under Exemption 5 of the Freedom of Information Act. According to Cagle, the exemption pertains to certain inter- and intra-agency records protected by civil discovery privileges, in this instance the deliberative process and presidential communications privileges. The DOJ did turn over some documents largely comprised of heavily redacted emails between government and staffers. FGA President and CEO Taryn Bragdon said the admin's efforts to keep the strategic plan out of the public eye is concerning. Oh, yes it is. I don't know what's going to happen in the midterms. I don't know what's going to happen in 2024. I know that 2022 is, for the terms of YouTube, going to be the second freest and fairest election in history. The only election that's freer and fairer than what 2022 is going to be what 2020 was. And that is, of course, the freest and fairest election in history. Nothing bad happened. 81 million votes, 10 scoops of ice cream. Joe Biden is the most popular president in history. Honk, honk, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Unless, of course, it goes the other way. Then it's going to be Russia influenced the election. Unless the Democrats get curb stomped, and then it's going to be Russian interference, and Russia just wants a puppet back in there so they can have their way with Ukraine, and all the other blue and conspiracy theories that are coming off of this. But as far as we go, when we talk about what's happening here, when we talk about what's happening with the FOIA request, if there is going to be this wonderful, magical way to make sure that there's absolutely no voter fraud anywhere, why don't they share it? Why don't they help get the American people involved? They can't. Now, if you want a certain outcome on election day, get out and vote. That's going to be the long and short of it. I don't advocate for voting. Normally, if you don't want to go vote, don't go vote. There are several lines on this coming ballot that I will be leaving blank. I cannot bring myself to vote for Ron Johnson. There are numerous lines I will be leaving blank coming up in this coming midterm. I will be voting for Tim Michels. I like Tim Michels. I think Tim Michels would do good for our economy here in Wisconsin. But it does seem that if you do want a certain outcome, you need to turn out in numbers as fast and as hard as you can to make sure that you overcome whatever honkening is coming here. But because it does seem like there's going to be some honkening coming here. Although nothing bad is going to happen if the outcome comes to Democrats. Remember, if Democrats sweep the House and get 435 seats and get all the pickups in the Senate, then this will be the freest and fairest election in history. But if Republicans wrest control of even one chamber, it will be Russian interference, disinformation, and a stolen election once again. Remember your rule of thumb for that. And remember, if you believe that there's going to be honkening, the only person who can stop the honkening is you. Don't get blackpilled. Don't stay home. Make them work for it. Make them fight for it. Make them, even if you know that they're going to honk it and your vote is going to be worthless, make them work for it. Make them have to honk to such unbelievable numbers that they have to go back and try to justify it to the American people. But don't violate your own conscience to do so. That's, again, why I'm not going to be voting for Johnson. Don't violate your conscience to do so. If your local Democrat Party and your local GOP and your local LP haven't given you a decent candidate to vote for, don't reward them with your vote. Even if you're voting against the other person, don't reward them with your vote. But with that, we're done. We're out of here. Wow, we got a lot done today. We got a lot through, a lot more than I thought we were going to. We did get a little bit of an earlier start than usual because, you know, now with all this weight that we talked about yesterday being lifted off my shoulder, I slept way better last night than I have in a very, very long time and got up at a decent hour. I don't typically do that. Even working late, last night, I got up at a decent hour, so that was pretty cool. Otherwise, come back here and join us tomorrow morning. By the way, tomorrow morning is a live chat day, so I've got the notebook over here, and we will be reading the names of those who chatted in the live chat throughout the week, as well as everybody who chats in the live chat tomorrow. We'll go through and read all the names. Some of your comments I can't read. I very much appreciate them, but some of them, because we are trying to cater to an AM radio audience to try to pull them away from the AM radio, instead going to internet radio when they're driving their kids to school. Because we're trying to cater to that, we are trying to keep the language on a PG level. But I still appreciate your spicy stuff, and I do laugh about it privately, even if I can't say it in front of the kids who might be listening in the car. So, with that, come back in here, throw me your best stuff, try to trip me up on air while we're doing this. That's always fun too. But otherwise, come back and join us for that, and stick around if you're on Twitch for the raid. Looking forward to seeing you here tomorrow. My favorite segment of the week is reading and saying thank you to the live chat as well. So definitely looking forward to that. Definitely looking forward to seeing you. And until tomorrow, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.